Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's public talk. I'd like to start off by, on behalf of the Maylands Historical and Peninsula Association, paying respects to the Noongar people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Tonight we've got to talk about women in local government. And perhaps now it isn't such a big issue. I mean, we have the deputy mayors come to join us here, and we have councillors left and to the right. We have a mayor of Braeswaters, now a lady. We have Lisa Baker as a local MP. We have many females representing our communities. But it hasn't always been this way. And our speaker tonight, Elizabeth Ree, was actually only the 7th female to be elected as a councillor in Stirling in 132 years. So great pioneers like Elizabeth Cowan and other people who've blazed a trail for women in government have led to the situation now where we have so many more, and it's quite a normal thing. But as I said, it hasn't always been there. I'm delighted Elizabeth's come along to talk. She came along to a talk a few months ago, was so enthusiastic she joined our society and offered to give us a talk as well, so we're very pleased to see her. In 2010, Elizabeth was named as one of the Australian National Ambassadors for the Year of Women in Local Government. She's also been nominated for Australian of the Year, West Australian Citizen of the Year, and the Telstra Business Woman of the Year. So there's obviously a lot of experience and a lot of accolades has gone our way. We're looking forward to an interesting talk about women in politics, and particularly in our local area. So I'd like you all to join me in welcoming Elizabeth. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for coming out on a cold night, and I know people are busy and people are probably very busy electioneering at this moment in time. I'd just like to say that I think sometimes local government is generic into you. Is that a bit better? You have a genetic problem sometimes. My father was the youngest ever local government councillor in Western Australia in the 1960s when he joined City of Perth at 32 years old, which we were, I think I was 6 at the time, 7 at the time or something. And they took up a petition that he should leave because people under 50 shouldn't be allowed to make decisions. And then they took up a petition because he was born in Italy but had been here since he was 6 months old and hadn't been back, that people that were born in Australia weren't allowed to be in council, which didn't go that far because 90% of the people that were actually on council at that time had probably been born in England or somewhere. So that one didn't work either. So from a very young age, we were used to making sure that the community was our priority. People came to our house night, day, whatever, with their problems. And my father was sort of one of those people that said, this is wrong, you know, you've got to do something about it. He used to say, if you're going to stand up and make a comment, you've got to follow it through. And I think that's the way I was raised, so it stayed inside me. When I went to school, I wanted to actually be a vet, always wanted to be a vet. But when I was 16, I had to fill out the paperwork to go into university, and I put down veterinary science, medicine and law, all of which I could get into. And my father, in typical European style, went, no, cross them all out, you can do pharmacy. You know, pharmacy's better for a girl. You know, pharmacy, someone will marry you. No one will marry you if you're a vet or a doctor or a lawyer. So, which was pretty disappointing, actually. So I went to Curtin to do pharmacy, which I didn't like at all. Didn't like all the germs coming down to me. And did my professional practice, and then I went and changed over to an environmental health degree, which was a very good one to allow me to complete at Curtin and then go over to Murdoch to do veterinary science. However, I met the boy, and the boy who I later married, even though I wasn't a pharmacist, I still met a boy and married. With that, I ended up going down south to work, which I was the first ever female principal health and building inspector in Western Australia. And that presented a lot of challenges, from building sites throwing hammers at me, saying they're not going to listen to a girl, picking me up and putting me into septic tanks that were empty, locking me into storerooms. And in those days, you know, I'm a lot fatter now. I was only 42 kilos. I mean, I was a lot fitter so I could run, but there wasn't much of me, so it was easy enough to pick me up and throw me away. But I had a really good dog. So, you know, when I came out to the sites with my dog and they'd start to throw a hammer or something at me, I used to whistle and to get out of the car and just bite them on the arms, and which was nice. But I think it was the environment of helping people that is what got me into local government and making a difference. And it was really rewarding. I mean, I had the opportunity to design a cemetery, which most people don't ever get to do, but people wouldn't realise how many rules are in the cemetery. Design sewage systems, which I went on to do a lot more of later on, but you know, basic recycling plants, water. The opportunities when you work in regional Western Australia in local government are just unbelievable. They're fantastic. I closed down Aboriginal reserves. I organised the building of new homes for different people, and you know, that was really pretty good. But one of the reasons I left, which, you know, it was very difficult being a female and being a manager, and I was the only female manager. It was only one of two women in the whole one of the councils I worked into, and I was only, I think it was my second council meeting, and one of the councillors got up and he banged on the table and he said, if she's going to be a real manager, then she has to wear a tie and she has to wear a jacket. And the CEO said, Miss Ree, will you wear a tie and jacket? And I just thought, oh my God. And I said, well, I went to a private school, I can tie a tie, I wore a jacket, you buy it, I'll wear it, you know. And he said, fine, that's it. Wrote that up in the minutes, on to the next one, because I thought if this attitude, I'm bound to buy the wrong tie, the wrong jacket, so I thought, just do it. Anyway, next council meeting came, and this big package came and undid it, and it was a poo brown jacket, matching tie, matching flared skirt that was past my knees, and a creamy coloured shirt. And I rang up my mum and I said to my mum, look what they're making me wear. And Mum said, are any of your friends there? No. They want you to put a bag over your head and go to that council meeting. That's what you do, because that's what your job is. Don't complain, you've got a job. And I went there and I just thought, oh my God, I must look like something from Yuckville. Anyway, but that's what they wanted me to wear, so that's what I did. And then over a year I was working there, and they did all sorts of things at the time. But then one night, about 1:30 in the morning, I was on my bed, and then my dog was right next to me, barking, and I turned the light on, and at the end of my bed was the Deputy CEO. And I said, what are you doing in my house? And he said, well, you're living in a local government house, and you signed a contract that would be inspected at any time. And I thought, I was only young, but even then I thought, well, that can't be right. And I said, no, if you don't get in my house, I'll get my dog to bite you. And he said, if you get the dog to bite me, I'll have the dog put down. And I came back with, well, you've got no power under the Act, only the CEO and myself have, so get out of my house, you know. And so he went. I stayed awake all for the rest of the night. And I went to work the next day. I talked to the CEO, and the CEO said, Miss Ree, you signed a contract that said the house could be inspected at any time. Couldn't do anything about it. I went to the police, and the police said, well, they didn't break in because they had a key. Nothing happened to you. No. And he said, well, there's nothing we can do. I thought, this can't be right. And so I rang up the Department of Local Government in Perth, and I told them, and they said the same. Well, there's nothing wrong with you. You signed a contract, no harm done. What are you carrying on about? You know, and it's just like, well, you're doing a guy's job, that's what you're going to handle. And I thought, well, it's Wednesday, I'm not staying here. So I asked around, ended up finding another place out of the council house, rang around a whole lot of friends that were in different places, and they all came over, including my boyfriend. and we all came and helped me shift out to another house, and I stayed there until I found another job, because I thought, I'm not leaving, because that you know, just says that we couldn't do it. And it wasn't the fact that you can't do the job, it was just the attitude at the time. And so then I went and worked for another place who said, oh, we don't give, you know, single females houses or anything, you know, you have to stay in a caravan unless you've got a family. And I went, oh, okay. So I stayed in the caravan, which meant I couldn't bring my dog. And then I found out that the guys could stay in houses. And so then I went and confronted the CEO, and the CEO said, no, you signed a contract to say you were happy in a caravan. And I thought, these contracts are just so much fun. So then I stayed there until I found another job, and I went and worked another job. It was just amazing the places that you go to where you can do, you know, just the same job, but you get treated totally differently. And if it wasn't for guys who sat there and must be really good dads to girls, I don't think a lot of women in the years ago would have survived, because it's the dads of girls that sat there and went, you don't treat women like that. That's, my daughters wanted to do that. That's not right. And they're the ones that actually paved the way for women. It's the dads that were gentlemen, the dads that were respecting, the dads that had daughters mainly. And I worked with a lot of them, and I give full credit to all the people that I know that supported me in those days. Even when I worked in town, in councils in town, one council I had to sign that, you know, I had to wear a dress at all times. I was the first female, and that didn't bother me. Okay, no problems. I went out to have a look at a piggery, and when I got to the piggery, I went to my car, put on a pair of overalls, Wellington boot, hard help, went out to the piggery, sorted out whatever was wrong, got back in. By the time I got back to the council, which was only like maybe a 15-minute drive, already I had a note, I had to go see the CEO, that it was embarrassing that I turned up in overalls instead of looking like a girl. And I thought, oh, I think we've gone too far. Somehow something went wrong here in the translation. But then I went and worked for the state government. And the state government, I was the first ever health and meat inspector in the state government, female, and the first one in Australia to work for Commonwealth. And I worked down the abattoirs, because in those days, to show that you could handle it, you had to work down the abattoirs and various other places, and Fremantle Wharf, which was a scary place to work. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. When I got to come into the office, because that's a big story working at the abattoirs, when I got to work in the office, I had to sign to say that I had to wear a skirt or a dress, that my dress had to be 1 inch below or above my knee, and that they had the right to measure at any time. I wasn't allowed to show my elbows, so my elbows always had to be covered. I'm still not knowing what elbows meant in those days to people. Well, I wasn't allowed to show my elbows. I wasn't allowed to show my breasts at all. And they also said I wasn't allowed to show my décolletage. And while I was finding all this information, I was sitting there going, documentation from my doctor to say what was wrong, and it couldn't be anything related to being a female. So that was a nice thing to write, which I did so. And then when I got home that night, I asked my mum in my décolletage was, and she told me, and I went, really? What do we wear? What am I going to wear to work? You know? So I thought that was funny. But it's interesting the fact of, and then getting the job at state government, one of my primary roles was dealing with local government all the time. And it was interesting over the years, even being a manager, going out and talking to people, as I said before, depending on what their attitude was and how they perceived you and what they said, you know, and interpreted what you had. And I mean, some councils have been fantastic in encouraging women to not only be councillors but also as staff and promoting staff. I mean, when I came to Stirling, which I've just won my fifth consecutive election, so I've been a councillor for 19 years at Stirling, and when I came 19 years ago, I think we only had a staff of about 700 in those days, and we had no female directors, no senior managers that were females, and now we've got one female director, and that's only in the last couple of years. So it's a long way, and I don't believe in quotas. I don't believe in just having women for women, but what I do believe is there is so many good women out there, and there's so many good blokes. There are so many really nice guys that don't get a chance either, because they are very fair, they get along with the girls, they get along with the guys, and because they're not politically motivated or aligned to a faction, they don't get anywhere either. And I think that's one of the saddest indictments on local government, whether you're male or whether you're female, is the factions rule. Politics rule, and it's sad because there's so many good people that should be given a better opportunity. Really, there should be. So that's just part of the dress part of being in local government and politics. But I think sometimes too, if guys look at things very differently from women are more looking at nurturing the community and what value for the community, while guys look more at the built environment. And that's why it's important to have both sexes. It really is. And the Institute of Company Directors said a good board is a board that has 1/3 of the opposite sex. So whether it's 2/3 female, 2/3 male, 1/3 should always be minimum of the other. And that's where, because you've got to get the yin and yang in order to come forward. And whether we like it or not, whether you're on the board of a footy club or you're on the board of West Farmers, it doesn't really matter. You're dealing with people and you're dealing with both sexes. So I think that sometimes gets lost, and particularly lost in local government, and I'm not quite sure how it could be addressed. I thought maybe being a councillor, because I went from an officer to a councillor, that I might be able to help a lot of staff and maybe right the wrongs and that, but it's very hard. It's got a little life of its own, unfortunately, local government, and I don't know what the answer is, because sometimes when they do amalgamations, all it does is make it worse. Sometimes when they do de-amalgamations, it makes it worse. But it comes back to the people. I mean, what do they say? The fish rots from the head. You've got to have it from the top. You have a good control and good people under you. Winston Churchill used to say, and Robert Menzies said the same, I always put and employ people that are cleverer than me, more innovative than me, under me, because they will be determined to look good, and they will make me look good, and our country will look good. And I think that's a sad loss today, that is how great men survived, and they're the ones that picked women that could go further. I mean, if you look at whether you like Margaret Thatcher or not, but if you look at the history of Margaret Thatcher, and actually Julia Gillard's not much different, because they were women that knew their little area, and some guy saw that they could actually achieve, and they would have common sense, and that's why they excelled. And I think sometimes we forget that we need both. We need women to support women, and we need men to support women, but we also need men to support men. And even more so now, when we have a change in jobs, it's more important. One of the things I was going to say, that in 2010, as it was said, that I was one of the ambassadors for women in local government, which was quite amazing, because that was out of, I think, 3,000 councils across Australia. So it was very significant. We had like 7 in Australia. But what we also had was, they made a book, the Australian Local Government Association did a book about women in politics, and they selected women across the whole of Australia, which was quite fantastic at its time, and it was very much before women were really mayors or anything else like that. And I'll just read to you this is where sometimes it's amazing whether you're at the right place at the right time. They asked everybody that they interviewed, and they interviewed, I think, about 200 women across local, state and federal government. It was quite a few. And they interviewed lots of people, and everybody had to have a quote. And when they did it, they took my quote, which I was quite amazed by. And my quote is, when one good person stands up, good people will follow and good things will happen. And I really believe that, because the silent majority is what's killing us. Across the board, it doesn't matter what it is. It is. We need good people to stand up. But when they chose the people in this booklet, they chose Gina McCaffrey, Mayor Felicity Ann Lewis, Mayor Nancy Joy Blanchard, Kerry Moyer, Deidre Eve Flint, Tanya Plibersek, Senator Sarah Hanson, Mrs Kay Hull, Senator Helen Kruger, Senator Honourable Jan McLucas, Christina Keneally, Councillor Joyce Crombie, Councillor Rose Jackson, Councillor Evan Jennings, Clover Moore MP, who later, if you know, became Mayor, Councillor Elizabeth Reid and Lisa Scafidi, Wendy Harmer. You know, we were very fortunate to have a few people in Western Australia chosen, and I'd like to donate that book to the Society, because this was one of the first times they actually really recognised women in politics across Australia. And virtually those women weren't political. Most of them were all grassroots women that came up, kids, families, parents, whatever, working class. They came through and said, we've got to do something, whether they become local government councillors or state or federal members of parliament. And I think that's the message to get across, you know, which we really need to concentrate on. Do it for your community. Start at the bottom. Look after whether you're fighting for the Peninsula Hotel, which is very much worth fighting for. Fighting to keep train stations alive and have development near train stations, but not over the top that they become ghettos. Make it mixed use. That's the sort of people that need to be empowered today, because if we don't get people in power that understand grassroots, we're gone. Because all we're doing is encouraging concrete, corruption, and really cannibalism, because that's what they're doing. They're just living off each other, and we're missing out. I think that also one of the things about women in politics, to me, is have your own moral compass. They can do so many nasty things to you. They can say it, they can broadcast it, they can do character assassinations of you, lots of things. But at the end of the day, it's only about you in the mirror. And if you can't sit there and say, well, I did the right thing, I've said the right thing, I'm honest to what I've done, then you shouldn't be in it. And I think that's the guidelines you've got to keep going in ourselves. But I think there's lots and lots of things we could do. To me, I'll give you a snippet. When I was a manager in state government, I was auditing the wastewater systems. And you've got to be able to take things as well, and the reuse of grey water. And we had an incident where a couple of people were getting sick from a reuse scheme, well, we thought might be associated with a reuse scheme. So I went down to have a look, and the reuse scheme was right next to a golf course. And the people associated with the golf course were getting a bit sick now and then, but nothing pointed at anybody. And when I went down there, I said to the guys at the golf course, you know, you're using the reused wastewater from next door? And they said yes. And I said, well, I can smell it, and it's pooling, so that tells me that's not going well. And they said, yeah, but if we tell them, they might charge us, and we might not get any water. And that'll cost us more money in fertiliser. I said, yeah, but the thing is, you don't want people getting sick. And they said, it's okay, we put up a big sign. I said, where's the sign? And above the club rooms, they had a big sign. Please do not lick your balls. And I had to sit there thinking, that's the way of saying don't do it, isn't it? So that's an example of some of the things where you've got to encourage people to do it. Now that incident was really a state government issue. State and local ended up handling the the complaints, which is why I got involved. But it's a state government issue because it was actually a water corporation sewage. So it's things like that where at all tiers of government, public servants should be public servants. And I think this is where it's being lost. Now, whether it's lost because of nepotism, the people that have been employed can't get good people, people aren't listened to, whatever. It's something's gone wrong along the way, and our health has been compromised. So I think those sort of things you've got to look at. And historical societies, I think, are one of the most important things that you have. And please keep hold of it, and I hope the council does. They are important because if you look to the future and you look at things like George Orwell's 1984, you look at Demolition Man, you look at all those Logan's Run and things like that, there isn't any history. All it is concrete. Concrete buildings, blackness, no trees, no animals, there's nothing in the future. And if you look at Demolition Man, which was made in 1995, set in 2025, there is no food, there is no meat, there's no flowers, everybody has like astronaut food, that's it. Nobody meets in person, it's all virtual reality, and there's no toilet paper in 2025. That's it. So when you think of what they've done, that was set in 1995, and how much is true today, you know? Driverless cars and all of those things, the Jetsons. I mean, I put up at council, 14 years ago, about having a charging station for electric cars, and I got told by the mayor, the CEO said no, it was a waste of time and no one would be interested and, you know, could ruin the car park. And the mayor said I should go back to the Jetsons. So, and because I was fortunate enough at that time to be on the RAC board, the RAC board said it was a great idea, and we did an arrangement with local government and did the first electric highway in the whole of Australia for people to use an electric car all the way down to Margaret River. So sometimes you've got to be in the right place, you've got to be able to think above it. Some people just say no to you because who you are. Some people will just change it, make it their idea, and then all of a sudden, you know, their name goes out in lights and you go, I'm sure I said that at a meeting. No, it wasn't you. But I do think history is important, and I think the fact that the decision makers at this particular time aren't looking at it is sad. And this is where it does come back to local government. Local government has got to fight harder. The emergency provisions that have been put upon us by state government is just crippling us building-wise that there's no need for at all. I think we need to push back, and people need to stand up and say, this is just out of control. We can't have it. We'll end up between the concrete and no trees, and as people have seen lately by MRD, they've cut down all the trees around the freeways to build a bike path because the people on bicycles want to be environmentally friendly, but there goes the trees. So could there not have been a different pathway, or are we going to plant other trees back? I mean, I think a bit of a yin and yang, but this is where state government doesn't have to explain, and maybe they should. And that's our fault. We're not making people accountable. And I think that's the bottom line. Years ago when you worked, you had to be accountable. I used to do treasury estimates. If I was $1 out, I wasn't allowed to go home. I had to work out why. And yet you can have people in the health department now, millions of dollars walk out the door, and where was the audit committee? Don't know. So I think it comes back to all of us, and you pay it forward, and you have to believe that if good people stand up, good people will follow, because that's when good things will happen and society will change. So I could talk all night, but I think that's the end for me. So thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. And as a mother and father of two daughters, we've always said to them, if you work hard at school, then you have choices about whether to go to university, and if you work hard at university, you have choices about what you want to do. And it's great to say, okay, yes, we've encouraged our children, but I think it's a chastening to hear what you had to put up with, and we're just grateful that our daughters have come through on your shoulders, as it were, and haven't had to suffer so much for that. So thank you, the sincerity, and it's very, very interesting. I will, without ask your permission, do we have any questions or any comments for Elizabeth? Anybody have any comments they'd like to, or questions they'd like to ask her?
I mean, I could sit there and talk about my current fund the last 10 years at Stirling, and it cost me about 150 grand in legal fees to prove that they were wrong and I was right, but that's a totally different chapter.
Well, another
Yeah.
Where was your father?
He was born in Sicily, in Salina.
In Italy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Salina down the bottom. But he was only 6 months old. And in those days my grandfather came out in 1885, started the first restore in 1904, and got married in 1906, and went on to have 14 boys. And so some of the boys were born in Italy, some were here, you know, trade, getting spaghetti backwards and forwards, difficult in those days.
So is the restore still going in?
Yeah, the Northbridge and Oxford Street.
And it's still in your family?
Yeah. My number 2 uncle's great-grandchildren are running it. Yeah. So the first one was actually in Fremantle. Yeah. So, I mean, that's history for you, because, you know, we forget what pioneering spirits everybody had. I mean, we're doing the history of this hotel. I think part of it is from people from Ireland, isn't it? That it was something to do, I can't remember all of it, but something to do with the Irish and to do with the woodlines. That when they were going out to Kalgoorlie and they were chopping down trees to build the railway track, they had to have somewhere to drink. And so that's why they built a lot of pubs along the railway line.
Not a bad idea either.
No.
Well, do you know that in Western Australia, some fantastic people, and there's still a lot of history to be done, but a lot of these fantastic people in Coolgardie have actually written a book on the woodlines. That means any person, any relative that you may have had that worked on any of the woodlines, they've now recorded in a book. It's fantastic read. It's just unbelievable to think men would go out in absolutely atrocious conditions, go out, chop down trees to lay a track, and some of the wood used to go back in for the furnaces to get the gold, but they had to lay the track as well, and it's just hard work. Yes.
I read it.
Yes, very, very good book. Very good.
That thick?
Yes.
Colin?
Yes, Colin.
Just I'd like to say that the Kalgoorlie pipeline was always under stress for the amount of water that was branching off all over to other towns in that north and south of the line. And that got through to Meriden in 1897. That got through there. And what I was going to say was, I lost it. Oh yes, the pump station was Sago, and the first night up to Meriden was Meriden there. It was very hot weather up at Kalgoorlie. They were using more water than what they could pump through, and they were having the pumps, two big pumps going more revs than what they were designed for, and burning 30 tonne of wood in 24 hours. So the wood was being gathered up to 100 miles around north and south of the pump station. And because I remember Dad drove the water out to the coast to get the foot cord around that's near up to the tonne and that sort of thing.
Well, years ago I looked at that pipeline as a project when I was working in state government, and they averaged a day 1,500 leaks, but it was not cost effective to go and fix up the holes, according to the government.
Still an astonishing achievement having built that.
Yes, and why did people doubt him?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And John's got a very interesting, it's not part of one of the recent displays about O'Connor.
Yes,
and
yes.
It's a terribly sad story, of course, at the end. Having been to Mundaring recently and walked across the Weir again, I realised the astonishing achievement to go from there all the way to Kalgoorlie. Still a long way now, on the train and the car.
You look at Ernie Bridge, and I mean, he said, why don't we change it the other way and bring the water back from the Ord? And I mean, that was years ago, and I mean, and you also look at the fact when, particularly Cloudbreak, when FMG was building theirs, which is in about 2005, they were building 10 different lines. We could have lined them all up to Ord, come through, or even through the Fitzgerald or through Whitnall, the Fortescue, the Murchison, and bring water down to Perth then. But
so when I often talk, first job as a management consultant I ever did, I came from overseas, was at the Snowy River scheme up in New South Wales, and we were doing some work on redesigning some of the structures. But as people said to us then, back in the 90s, that could never happen now. There isn't the political will and the vision to make something as life-changing as that. And it is sad, in my personal opinion, that we can't think that far ahead. And with 3-year terms of Parliament, I mean, you're not going to think 20 years ahead. But all the points you're making are really important about paying forward, building for the future, building for the community. Any other questions?
I'll comment just further to what you've just said, is that because we've lost the statesman, and what you do have is you do have a plethora of people who election to election, and that's their focus. It's short term, as long as an election cycle is.
Yeah.
We've lost that.
Sorry, John?
We've become very little people.
Yes. We've lost, lots of people have lost that ability to think what you call cathedral thinking.
Yes.
well, people are risk averse, and with political correctness, people are inhibited about saying anything about anyone anymore, which comes back to George Orwell, where speak is just not part of the language anymore. You have to follow the rules or feel that you'll be done in. Logan's Run, what's another one? Not Xanadu, something else. There was another one. There's quite a few movies made where they just didn't want to say really what was going on, but it is what's going on. You know, and people will talk now about, you know, Local Agenda 21, which initially was about local governments uniting to make it a better place. But then it turned into having, you know, 10 people rule the world, and the population control, globalisation by 10 people, and it'll all be done, you know, by 2021. So, but, you know, we fought back against that. But I'm always mindful of things like Mad Max and the Thunderdome and a couple of those others. You know, where is our projected going in the future of making sure we have water, making sure we have trees? And when you look at state governments saying that local government must, you know, increase the tree canopy and don't let people chop down trees in their backyard, but then when you look around, they chop trees down in schools and they're chopping trees down on freeways, and you think, well, you know, monkey see, monkey do. You know, what are we doing here? So.
And that's one of the issues we're facing at the moment, isn't it, down Peninsula Road?
But that's the thing, is the focus is so much on the mum and dad developers who are just looking after their little blocks. When you look at the state government, and I use City of Bayswater as an example, you've got the North Link project, the Tonkin Gap project, 3 new train stations. Tonkin Gap alone ripped out 22 hectares of trees in one fell swoop. And that's just one of them, so it's easily 100 hectares. Hectares, not acres, hectares.
And with that went all the birds and the bees.
That's 1 million square metres of trees gone from state government initiatives. Now, we do need to have that infrastructure, I won't argue that point, but there are ways to do things where, you know, you look at what denudation that's happened, and they haven't used half the space that they've taken all the stuff out from.
No, they are some incredibly serious.
Maryland's had 2 women as chairman of the road board, 2 like since the war, World War II, but they acquitted themselves very well.
Well, women in the bush have always been more well respected, especially with CWA, etc., as their backing. But the first ever local government woman councillor in Western Australia was in Cottesloe. And don't forget that Edith Cowan was the first ever women parliamentarian ever. You know, so, you know, that's, you know, It still comes back down to good men. Good men and good women is what society needs, and the silent majority have got to stand up. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for your time. Fascinating. Thank you very much for the book. We'll make sure I'll give it to our archivist and he'll do that. And thank you so much for the encouraging words. And we do believe in history, not just to look to the past. It's one of the things we're grappling with as an association is how do we make history come alive for the next generation?
Yes.
How do we get the young people involved so that history is being created every day, of course. And we want to try and make sure that we're connecting with young people, with the schools and things, so that they take an interest, rather than the people who've lived here for 50, 60, 80 years. It's a generation just been born. So that's a real challenge for us.
Well, I think like
Not
the brick kiln project, the first thing when you said you want to get younger people involved, the first thing they said is, where's the coffee shop? You know, they sort of got a bit lost in that conversation.
Anyway, we have a small gift to give you. Thank you very much. As a token of our gratitude for coming along, and we'd also like you to draw the record in. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much.
And we have a bottle of wine or some chocolates for... I know my name's not in it, but this is okay. John McClellan. So
Yay.
John, hey, the cameraman, John. He knows what's in there. He knows where it comes from. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to give that to John.